Hey everybody, ronarray here, and I've been playing EK Ignite Elementalist build from the league start. It went pretty nice for me since Ignite proliferation builds are very pleasant to play even early. And in this video, I will showcase the final, Uber version of the build. The damage now is significantly improved, reaching DoT cap of 38 millions at normal target. So the build now can kill Uber bosses too, and I cleared most of them, even if it's still more of a mapping instead of a bossing build that excels while farming map content instead. To clear maps, we can just shield charge around plus hit Herald of the Hive pulses and use EK only occasionally to spread Ignite with proliferation. Plus, we can also use Headhunter, which can make the runs much faster and can provide some tankiness modes to improve quality of life if you have budget for it. Survivability right now is heavily built around the Svalinn, which provides 88-89% of block chance, protecting us from most of the hits. In this video, I will also cover a few changes you can make to get more damage or tankiness instead too. Together with my current setup, my items, and everything you might need to know about the build. Please subscribe to the channel if you appreciate updates or enjoyed playing the build too, and let's go! So now, let's talk about the build, and let's start with one of the most important questions. Are we using Ethereal knives of the Massacre or normal Ethereal knives? So right here, I think the choice is pretty big. For bosses, and especially Ubers or any hard targets, I recommend to use normal Ethereal knives because they're dealing more damage. It's also pretty comfortable to use them. However, to make sure your clearing maps is very good, I would recommend to just swap to Ethereal knives of the Massacre for maps and any other content except very tanky targets. That way you can literally hit all around you and it's much easier to clear even if the damage is going to be lower. So most of the time I would just run with Ethereal knives of the Massacre and swap back to normal Ethereal knives for Ubers and other hard targets. Also, it's a personal preference, you can pick any skill that you like and even fight bosses with a Massacre or play all the game with normal Ethereal knives. That completely depends on you. So the next question is a Svalinn setup. For the Svalinn right here we have triggered a socketed elemental spell on block with 0.25 second cooldown, and that way we can trigger a lot of additional skills including the curses. However, I believe that on bosses and especially on Ubers, it's kinda uncomfortable to wait when boss will hit you, so you can curse only after. So I'm still using the setup with Arcanist brand together with flammability and elemental weakness in my wand instead. So I'm not placing the curses into the Svalinn, just because I believe that for harder targets, it's very uncomfortable to wait until they will hit you and you will block. It's much easier to just use the Arcanist brand. So if you want to click less buttons and you want to get rid of Arcanist brand completely, you can just drop it and move flammability and elemental weakness in the Svalinn. Otherwise, I recommend to keep the similar setup, so Arcanist brand and double cures, and in the Svalinn I have the Flame Surge, which in my opinion is giving a pretty nice amount of damage. Other two skills that you need to place into the Svalinn, just non-elemental skills, so for me it's Shield Charge, and I'm also using Herald of Agony right here. There's another cool trick how you can get the Culling strike into the build. You can just use one of your golems, so summon Flame Golem for example, and link it to Culling strike support. That way, your golem damage is going to Culling strike your enemies when your golem is hitting them. That way, it's going to be much more comfortable against single target, even if golem is not hitting that often. Herald of Agony is another part of the topic which is very interesting to talk about. That's the last herald that we are using to improve the damage. However, right here, it's a pretty interesting question. If you're aiming to get as much damage as possible, using Herald of Agony is recommended. However, if you want to get tankier for some reason and you're not really happy to rely on Svalinn, you can use Flash and Stone instead. Since the build heavily relies on Svalinn to protect itself, you might still be prone to occasional one-shots, so if you're not playing hardcore, it's usually not a big issue, you just rejoin the map and finishing it without a single bad moment. However, if you want to withstand those one-shots, using Flash and Stone instead of the Herald in the Sand stance is going to improve your survivability. And another topic in the similar situation is just using Servant of Decay or Fullborn Coming Calamity. Both of those options are very solid for EK Ignite build. So Fullborn Coming Calamity is giving about 12 to 13% of additional damage compared to Servant of Decay. However, Servant of Decay is giving 6% of damage from hits is taken from Void Spawn live before you per Void Spawn. Since you have 4, it's going to give you 24% of additional survivability. And I believe that most of the time it's worth to use Servant of Decay instead of Fullborn Coming Calamity, because 24% of additional survivability is going to protect you against one-shots and make your gameplay significantly more comfortable. Since I'm already DoT capped, I'm probably going to keep using my Servant of Decay. For Servant of Decay as a corruption, I recommend like increased damage as an option or +1 level of gems, but both options are looking very solid. So in the Uber endgame setup, we're going to move our Ethereal Knives or Ethereal Knives of the Massacre into our helmet, using Ethereal Knives, Inspiration, Cruelty, and Swift Affliction. And in the body armor, instead, we're going to use Enlightening together with Herald of Ice, Herald of Purity, Thunder, Malevolence, and Herald of Ash. I covered how to craft such helmet with like a +4 level of projectiles and like skill gems together with burning damage in the video that I'm going to leave in the description and in the pinned comment too. Check it out if you still don't have the helmet. And for the ring, we're still using Polaric Devastation. You can get Corruption with like damage multiplier, but it costs 50 divines plus at the moment, and I don't really believe it's worth it. So for the Lost Unity, you can also use only the basic version, you don't need anything right here. Headhunter perfectly should be corrupted, but even basic one will work just fine. I think it's making your like mapping capabilities significantly better. Svalinn and Grace of the Goddess is still the main part of the build, so like aiming for them is recommended. For the boots, since I currently dropped Tempest Shield from the build completely, I'm using Chance to Avoid Being Shocked as an implicit, it's 40%. And Chance to Avoid Being Shocked as a suffix. I already showcased how to craft such boots, you can find the video in the description, and I believe that just avoiding the shock altogether is very nice right here. You can also use a Stormshroud Jewel to avoid other elements that way too, so keep that in mind. For the gloves, we don't need anything in particular, so just like resistances and ignites deal damage faster, and that's pretty much it for the items. So Bottled Fate right here is used only for like unique enemies and mostly for pinnacle bosses. You're going to get 10% increased damage taken to enemies for consecrated ground, so just like come close to the boss, and when you will hit it, your Bottled Fate will be used automatically because of enhancement modifier right here. I recommend it because it still gives about 10% of damage and helps a lot, especially against Ubers. Everything else is kind of obvious, so Zero Promise and Cinder Swallow is pretty nice. For Cinder Swallow, regeneration, recover of energy shield, and enemies ignited during effective damage is just recommended. As a light flask has always movement speed, some additional duration, and reduced effect of Curse's Skull. I'm still using at least one Divine Life flask with like immunity to bleeding, corrupted blood, and instant recovery to just recover faster when I'm receiving damage. Now, let's talk a little more about R3. First off, since the build is DoT capped, you will need to change enemy stats to Uber and Pinnacle boss to calculate the damage properly. So the DoT cap is only capping your damage against normal enemies. So if for some reason enemies will have like damage reductions, you still will deal more and more past the DoT cap. But for a normal enemy, unfortunately, the damage over time is capped around 39 millions. So at the moment, as you can see, almost nothing gives me more damage. I'm receiving only 1% from Mastermind of Discord, for example. That way, to calculate the damage in the PoE, you will need to swap it from Guardian and Pinnacle boss to like Uber Pinnacle boss, when we have about 20 millions of damage. And right now, I recommend to get more tattoos of Aaron, who is Shaman. Those could be a little expensive, but using more of that is definitely recommended. However, I still would recommend to keep a few mana regeneration tattoos too, at least here and here. Mostly because you're already DoT capped with the damage, and you will need to keep your mana regen higher than your mana cost. For the jewels, we're still using the same stuff, it's mostly a light of minion with fire damage. We're also using Elegant Hubris with endurance charges right here. If you don't have a Hubris with endurance charges, you can always just use a small cluster jewel with enduring composure like I'm recommending in my general PoE. So at the clusters, I'm using just Doriani, Prismatic and Sadist. And Empowered Envoy and Endbringer are pretty important, they're giving a decent amount of damage for small nodes right there. Another interesting question is like why I'm not using Forbidden Flame and Forbidden Flash. The main reason for it is that at the moment we will need to pay about 40 divines for Flame and I would say about 20-25 divines for Flash, ending up with 70 divines approximately to get both Forbidden Flame and Forbidden Flash. So I don't really believe it's worth it. So for example, if you look at Mastermind of Discord right here, it will give us approximately 17% of DPS, like 17.9. And if you just compare it to double normal jewels right there, they're giving 7% each, ending up with about 14. So if I will pay that 70 divines, I will get only 3% of additional DPS, which is in my opinion not worth it. So either prices will go down or I might get it later. The same situation goes with Lucia, so if you will just go for like Farewell to the Flash, it's going to give only 20% of DPS, which is only 6% better. However, if you have a lot of budget, I definitely recommend to go for Farewell to the Flash, because like that's probably the best option at the moment. So get like Forbidden Flame and Flash for any kind of Elementalist things, like Shaper of Flames, Shaper of Storms, Liege of Primordial, Bringer of Ruin. Also keep in mind that Shaper of Storms is still giving more damage than Mastermind of Discord, so 24% against 17%. So 7% more, and Shaper of Storms is definitely worth it. There's also one big update possible in that build, which I'm not doing just because it costs too much at the moment and it's not really looking like it's worth it. You can add the Focused Amulet right here to get about 37% of additional damage. That's an absolutely huge amount of damage. However, I believe that at the moment, paying for such amulet might be a little too much, especially recommending that to all of you, because there's only a few at the market. Crafting it is pretty annoying because you're risking a base while you're recombining, and the base costs like 120 divines. And if you would like to buy it from people, it's going to cost about 400 divines at the moment. I might craft one of those later on, and go for it only if you have the budget. Another interesting question is how to fit all auras. At the moment, I just got rid of Sovereignty completely and dropped Tempest Shield, because we can get the cap block, so 87.75 and 89, just while using Arcane Guardian instead. So Arcane Guardian right here, possible points right here for the block, and block tattoos here, here and here are helping me just to reach my block cap with the Svalinn. I definitely recommend that approach if you have the boots with chance to avoid choke. So if you feel like Ignite or like Chill generally annoys you, you can always get like a Stormshroud, Viridian Jewel, modifiers to chance to avoid being choked apply to all elemental elements. That thing is pretty nice and giving a lot of quality of life, so feel free to use it and just swap some of the damage-oriented jewels. It's going to hurt your damage a little. So that's pretty much it, and you will be able to find the rest of the information in my POBs and in my guide as well. Hope it will help you out to transition properly to the Uber version. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time. ronarray out.